Welcome back to On the Move with Victor Shi. This is Victor Shi. It is Tuesday, February 28th. When the Supreme Court overturned the right to abortion last summer, it was the first time that my generation realized that our rights are literally controlled by 9 justices, really technically 5 justices, because that's what you need to actually win a case, elected to a lifetime on the Supreme Court. It was the first time that Democrats as well, who, let's be frank, aren't traditionally motivated by the courts as a voting issue, started paying attention to the importance of our judiciary and why who we nominate to the bench is so important. To President Biden's credit, he has also been a president who has really understood this. The other week, he confirmed the most amount of judges, outpacing that of Trump and also Obama at this point in their terms, confirming over 100 judges and justices just 2 years into his presidency, which is quite remarkable. And now, as we face yet another Supreme Court term with many high-profile cases ranging from affirmative action to student loans to the future of how elections are administered, a lot of people are wondering, what can we do to fix the Supreme Court? Is it time for reform? And how do we do it? And if it's even possible? My guest today is Representative Ro Khanna. And he should be coming in any second by now. So hopefully we'll get him on soon. But he is a representative from California. We're going to talk about the Supreme Court, what we can do to fix it, because he has not only introduced a bill that would reform our Supreme Court, but he also has been a really active voice about this on Twitter. The other day, he talked about why we need term limits, and today we're going to talk about why that is so desperately needed. But before he comes on, I just want to quickly talk about some of the news of the day. Today, as I mentioned, is the Supreme Court oral argument day for the student loan program. This is a completely lawful program that the president and his administration has enacted. And today it's just, I think, going to be another indication for all of us to see whether or not the Supreme Court is as extreme and MAGA as it is. You know, Trump appointed 3 of the justices. In my sense, unlawfully. You had Neil Gorsuch, Brett Kavanaugh, Amy Coney Barrett, who was confirmed right at the last minute. And now...
Hi.
How's it going?
Good.
So we have a lot to get to, and I see you're calling from your phone. So this is we're playing with all sorts of different technology here. But I want to talk to you first before we get into your bill about the Supreme Court and term limits. I want to start off by asking you about your reaction to what we learned yesterday regarding Rupert Murdoch and other Fox News executives knowing that what Trump was saying was BS, yet they still allowed people like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and Sean Hannity to spew lies to their viewers. What do you take away from that?
Well, it's very concerning. I mean, it goes against the very principles of journalism. It's why the fairness doctrine used to be an important element of our policy, which he actually couldn't do that under the fairness doctrine. That was repealed under President Reagan. But, obviously it undermines the very notion of journalism.
Yeah, and one of the things that I'm curious to get your perspective on, just as a member of Congress, I'm wondering if you can shed light on why Republican members of Congress are so craven and hungry to go on Fox News. I'm not saying Democrats don't feel the same about going on MSNBC or CNN, but it seems like there's a different level of intensity for Fox News and how much Republicans want to get on that channel. And I'm wondering if you can explain to us why that is. Is it the business model? Is it just the incentives? What about Fox News keeps Republicans wanting to come back?
Well, I go on Fox News too. I mean, I think it's got 3 million plus viewers, and many of the folks who watch it are voters. And by the way, there are a lot of Democrats who watch it. They sheepishly admit it in text messages when I'm on. But I got to be honest with you, a lot of times I go on CNN or I go on Fox, and there are more people who watch it on Fox. So I think it would be a big mistake for Democrats or progressives to think that they should just boycott a station that has a lot of viewers.
Yeah, I mean, it does get a lot of viewers, and Tucker Carlson's show, I think, is the #1 primetime show, which is equally horrifying. But I want to ask you one last thing about Fox News, which is Kevin McCarthy giving Tucker Carlson access to 41,000 hours of January 6th footage. Is there anything that Democrats can do to stop that, or do you think it's appropriate for Democrats to give other channels the same information?
I do. I think that if we want to make a decision to get that information out, you can't just pick one journalist to selectively give that. I mean, that's the whole point of a free marketplace of ideas. And this is really Hakeem Jeffries' call, and he has the ability to release it to other news networks, or at least make the case for that, and I hope he will.
Yeah. So let's turn to talk about your bill about reforming the Supreme Court. Tell us about that bill that you've introduced.
Well, it's a common sense idea, and the point is simple. A justice should not serve more than 18 years. That's a long time, and they can still be a judge, right? Because the Constitution requires that you be a judge for life. They just don't have to be on the appellate court. They can be on the district court. They just shouldn't be on the Supreme Court.
So, as I understand, so this would apply only for Supreme Court justices, not for every other federal judge, or would it also apply for federal judges as well?
It would only apply for Supreme Court justices. It would only apply for the appointment to the Supreme Court. Once they're done with the Supreme Court, they can be on the circuit court, district court, and every president would get 2 appointments. This is not court packing. This is actually just objective. And here's the idea. You shouldn't be able to make decisions 40, 50 years after you were appointed, and totally out of touch with a modern life, totally out of touch with the democracy that elected the president to appoint you. And so what this is saying is 18 years on the Supreme Court, every president gets 2 appointments. And it's something that the president's own commission, by the way, recommended as the most plausible court reform possibility.
So, of course, the question is, how likely are Republicans going to support this bill? Have you heard anything from your colleagues about how willing they're to support this type of legislation?
It's been very hard to get them on board, and it's unfortunate because they're for term limits for everything else. Term limits for House members, Senate members. Why not term limits for Supreme Court members? But we're going to continue to try. But I'll tell you, while Republicans in the House and Senate may not support it, Republicans in the country support it. This polls off the charts with independents, Democrats, and Republicans, 70-75% approval rating. So I'm hoping the president will run on this in his reelection.
Yeah. I mean, it seems like Republicans are out of touch with nearly, or at least in the House and Senate, are out of touch with what the vast majority of people actually want. But I want to ask you, in the same vein, is there any way that we can raise the standards for Supreme Court justices and other judges so that we at least ensure that we have people who meet some sort of qualification? So I remember during the Trump administration, there were so many judges who were deemed unqualified by the American Bar Association. We saw with the judge down in Mar-a-Lago in the special master debate who didn't even seem to know about basic law. Is there anything that we can do to at least make sure that the president who nominates a judge is qualified and meets some sort of standards?
Well, that's the whole purpose of the Senate, and advice and consent. And the problem is that the Republican senators rubber stamp those judicial nominees, even if they were unqualified. And we've got to make that win that argument politically, to say you can't just be appointing unqualified judges, and this is why we need better people in the Senate, and to make that really an issue. I'm reluctant to say that there should be some test or something for judges, but that would be like saying there should be a test to run for Congress, and I think those types of things could unintentionally put barriers in public service that's supposed to be democratic. But the responsibility has to be in exercising properly by senators.
Yeah, so I really hope that your bill gets through, because term limits, I think, are a no-brainer. But speaking of the bills that you've introduced, you've also introduced a new bill regarding East Palestine, Ohio. And I think this morning, the New York Times reported that you and another Democratic lawmaker were the first to introduce that bill. Can you tell us about that bill and what it does in response to what happened in Ohio?
Chris DeLuzio, who represents a district in Western Pennsylvania, and I introduced this. And it is really simple. It says the National Transportation Safety Board in 2015 made a recommendation for what we needed to do to keep our trains safe. And it just implements the recommendations they made. And if those recommendations had been followed, the train that derailed would have been covered. The inflammable materials on it would have been covered. There would have been less argument about whether there should have been regulations covering it. And so it's I'm hoping all the Republicans who've been speaking about this will support this legislation.
Yeah. And are these the type of things that, for instance, the Trump administration rolled back?
So the Trump administration rolled back some of them. Some of them, frankly, were not adopted in 2015, even because the railroad lobby was vociferous in trying to dilute it. President Obama made great progress, but the railroad lobby is a huge force. And what this would do is say, we're going to accept the National Transportation Safety Board's recommendations. And what they said was safe. By the way, they cited in that the Association of Railroads as being okay with these regulations. So these are things that even the railroad industry recognizes, but their lobbyists who care about the corporate profits and stock buybacks don't. I hope everyone can come around this. Instead of politicizing this issue, what we need to do is fix the issue so you don't have 1,000 train derailments every year.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of those issues where it should be a no-brainer, and for people in D.C., as Republicans in D.C., not to support this, it would be very telling about just how, I guess, little they care about the American people. But I want to ask you about one other issue, and which is you represent Silicon Valley, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts about AI, especially in light of all the talk we're hearing about ChatGPT. I think it's pretty cool, but it also is concerning to me as an English major and what it might do to writing and what it might do to students. What do you think of this new kind of AI revolution, what ChatGPT is doing? I mean, how can we make sure that it is regulated in the right way in Congress?
Well, it's got a long way to go. Right now, it doesn't even measure up to the Cliff Notes. Try it out and ask questions. We're far off from doing like Barack Obama's 2004 keynote speech. Maybe it can do absolutely boring, pedantic committee hearing openings, but the technology has a long way to go. So anyone who thinks it's going to take the place of liberal arts education, of good thinking or good writing, should just spend 15 minutes on ChatGPT, and they'll see that right now it doesn't even measure up to Cliff Notes. Now, that said, there needs to be thoughtful regulations on it. What am I talking about? Well, you don't want ChatGPT, for example, making recommendations on medicine that don't have proper safeguards. You don't want them to be making recommendations on mental health, on talking about things such as suicide. I mean, there are a lot of issues where we've got to be careful in what what artificial intelligence is doing. So are there great possible benefits to artificial intelligence? Of course there are. We want it to enhance a doctor's ability to detect cancer. We want it to be able to help scale communication in ways that are appropriate. But it can never take the place of thinking. It can never take the place of good judgment, and it needs to be thoughtfully regulated.
That's assuring, and I know that Congress is doing a lot of work on this. I know Ted Lieu, your colleague, has also been very outspoken about.
He's one of the few computer scientists in Congress, and so he's really, really thoughtful. And now it's a debate because he had a ChatGPT speech in Congress, and while it may not replace Cliff Notes, the bar of congressional floor speeches is pretty low. So I'm not saying it's something better than a congressional speech.
Well, I think they could do a better job than Marjorie Taylor Greene or Lauren Boebert writing a speech, at least. But it's pretty astonishing what it can do. But I'm glad that it doesn't live up to the Cliff Notes standard. One last question before I let you go. I want to ask you about Ukraine, because you have some Republican colleagues right now who are calling on withdrawing military funding from Ukraine. I know you sent a letter earlier last year, basically just urging diplomacy. I'm wondering first if your stance has changed on that and what you think our role in Ukraine should be going forward.
Well, as you know, I have supported the president and Tony Blinken, who've done a terrific job, and have voted for every aid package, and I think we need to continue to provide aid. I admire the president going there to Ukraine. I admire Janet Yellen going there to Ukraine. But we have to have some sense of how we're going to land the plane. Right now, Russia has 6 times the artillery as Ukraine. They've done a valiant job in fighting for their territory, but I want to see how we can continue to support Ukraine and at the same time on a parallel track have dialogue that ultimately leads to a just peace. That's exactly what President Biden is doing, and he has my support. I think he's gotten this policy right.
So what is the end goal for Republicans who are calling on withdrawing support from Ukraine? How dangerous would that be?
It'll be very dangerous right now when you basically get Putin then carte blanche to march into Ukraine and take a huge chunk of territory. And it's a danger not just to the people of Ukraine. It's a danger if you care about Taiwan. It's a danger if you care about North Korea and the threat of an invasion in South Korea. It's a danger if you care about Iran's potential ambition. So if you care about the supporting territorial sovereignty, you have to stand up for Ukraine. That said, as we provide aid, we also need to know that wars end ultimately because of diplomacy. And the idea that saying that the administration should continue to explore those avenues while supporting Ukraine, that is out of bounds, I think is wrong. I mean, even at the height of the Cold War, we were talking to the Russians. And that's why I respect this president. He has struck that balance. He has not escalated to the point of a nuclear risk. He has stood firmly with Ukraine, but he has also pursued at the same time a dialogue and kept the dialogue open. And I have a lot of respect for him and Tony Blinken in particular, who's done a phenomenal job.
Yeah. Well, we have a lot to be concerned about, both abroad and here at home. And I thank you. I know a lot of people thank you for what you're doing to make at least our democracy stronger. So thanks so much for all you're
Victor,
doing.
Thank you. I follow you. You've got a great voice, an important voice. We need young people, passionate, thoughtful people like you, strengthening our democracy, helping us become a cohesive, multiracial democracy, which is our destiny. So thank you for what you're doing.
Of course. Thanks so much. Have a good one.
Thank you.
Bye. Okay, well, that was a really interesting episode with Representative Khanna, who I think the Supreme Court bill could be really interesting. Our Supreme Court is fundamentally broken. The fact that we have judges and justices, like I said, the intro, 5 justices serving for life can determine all of our rights. And that's honestly horrifying. And it would be one thing if it were a Supreme Court that actually respected the rights and actually respected precedent and the rule of law. But we no longer live in that era. We live in an era where judges and justices don't respect precedent. They don't seem to actually care about rights. And so we have to look at new reforms for the court. I think it's not a radical idea to start examining whether things like term limits are appropriate. And, just like he said, there are term limits for basically every other branch in the United States, or not basically every other branch in the United States. For Congress, for the executive branch, for state level government, you have term limits for every single branch, and it makes sense. And the fact that the Supreme Court is an outlier, I think we really have to start exploring that. So we'll keep close attention on what happens on that front. Just a couple of things before I let you go. First off is, I mentioned this at the beginning, Fox News. We learned yesterday that Rupert Murdoch, as well as other Fox executives, knew that what Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, and Sean Hannity were saying were complete lies, yet they still let it happen. And it's one of those things where this is a corporation that does not care about news at its core. And one of the things that I've been thinking about a lot is, you have this, especially during the Trump administration, but also happening right here on Fox, which is, it doesn't matter how much integrity or how much principle those on the lower end of the corporation have or government have. So you can have, people with journalistic integrity, people with journalistic ethics. But if the person at the top, if people at the top don't also share the same, it really kind of throws a stain at the entire organization and the people who actually do have integrity and respect. So that's why leadership matters so much. And right now, there are basically 2 options for Fox. It's either they pay off the billions of dollars and they pay the damages and realize that what they're doing is completely just nonsense and also a danger to democracy, or they replace the leadership. And I think that's the only way that Fox News as a corporation can move forward. We have to take them down. We have to take people like Tucker Carlson, Laura Ingraham, Sean Hannity down from the airwaves. And that only happens when you have a leader who has the courage to do so and replace them with people who actually care about facts and truth and democracy. And so we'll see what happens with Fox, but just a very, very damning report yesterday. If you haven't checked out the deposition, you should check out the deposition. It's really, even for Fox News, it's one of those things where it makes you question whether or not this is really the end of Fox News, because I don't see how any organization is able to recover from that, no matter how good their PR is. So we'll see. One other thing is Fetterman is doing slightly better. His office released a report yesterday, or a statement yesterday, saying they don't have too much to say about his condition, but he is doing better and he is starting to recover. So all our thoughts and prayers are with Fetterman. And also in the House, Representative Joaquin Castro went through a successful operation yesterday to treat a liver cancer. And so he is on the mend and hopefully he is doing better. So our thoughts and prayers with both of them. So let's call a day from there. We have some great guests coming up this week. You don't want to miss them. It's a mini kind of Congress party for On the Move this week. Tomorrow we have on Representative Dan Goldman, who I'm sure you've all seen either from his time in the House so far or his time being the lead impeachment manager for the House during the first impeachment of Donald Trump. So Representative Goldman will join me tomorrow. On Thursday, we're going to have on Representative Adam Schiff. Yes, Adam Schiff will be joining us on Thursday to talk about protecting democracy, January 6th, as well as his run for the U.S. Senate in California, which is where I am currently in right now. It's a very hot and contested race, so you don't want to miss that. Adam Schiff on Thursday. And then on Friday, we're going to have on Simon Rosenberg, who has been a very important voice on Twitter, who got the 2022 election right when few people did. You don't want to miss that. We'll talk about what happens in 2024, the role of young people going forward. You don't want to miss that. So join us every day this week at 8 a.m. Pacific time, 11 a.m. Eastern time, right here on youtube.com/Politicon. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks so much for watching this episode, and I will see you all tomorrow.